Actually, Brian is here. Let me go to Brian real quick. We have a little bit of time.
My
How you doing,
apologies.
bro?
My apologies. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I had a little technical issue there. I closed the wrong window.
No, you're okay. Brian, would it be possible to bring you back on a little bit later? I'm Professor Morandi is coming on at 8:30 supposedly. I thought you were going to be on a little bit earlier. I thought the thing was, I didn't realize that Rachel was going to run that long. I am sorry. That's my just.
Is he coming? Is he coming on right now, or in like 30 minutes? Okay. All right. Sure.
Well, unless you want to be on with him together. I mean,
yeah, we could do that. I would love to talk with the professor.
All right. So let's have a conversation now. I'm deeply annoyed. I'm deeply annoyed. My annoyance comes from this notion that, look, you have been far more apt at reading the policy documents, and you've been talking about this stuff for years. Without reading the policy documents, though, a few things were clear. A, the U.S. had a vested interest in taking down all of these governments in the Middle East, and regardless of the administration, worked assiduously to do it, with Iran being the last one. Two, what Trump was putting out was always off the table for Iran, meaning you are putting out a deal that you know that they're going to reject. Three, in the policy document, Which Path to Persia, they point out, hey, we need to create a justification to attack Iran every bit as much as we did with Iraq, where we have these fake negotiations, where we go through all of this theater, and then so we did everything we could, so we're going to attack. These things were very clear. And yet, Iran didn't seem to get the memo. Even after we did this to Russia with the Minsk agreements that were designed to stop a conflict were used to build up a very large military, with Merkel and the European leaders saying, we lied. How did they miss this? Give me your take on that.
I don't think that they missed it. I think they were much weaker than they. Obviously, they're not going to admit that they're weaker than they appear. And you could tell, especially in the last couple of weeks, they really went out of their way to try to project strength and to try to kind of bluff their way out of this. They knew it was coming. They knew they were running out of time. They were using negotiations for their own game to try to delay, to try to draw it out for as long as possible, because they knew they were being set up. And if they just outright rejected negotiations, they would lose. If they agreed to absolutely everything President Trump demanded of them, they would still lose, because then the U.S. would just come back a week later and say they violated it. We have secret intelligence saying they violated it and we need to attack. So it was a lose-lose situation. I had warned that with the collapse of Syria, it indicated a certain overextension of both Russia and Iran. I warned about that. And the collapse of Syria meant the elimination of the very formidable integrated air defense network there between Israel and Iran. With all of that gone, it was clear the conditions were now prepared. We have to remember, this goes all the way back to the Arab Spring, the U.S. engineered Arab Spring. They did that to knock out all of Iran's allies and then isolate and knock out Iran. And then zooming out and looking at the big picture, because a lot of people are failing to do this. They are laser focused and obsessed with Israel. This is about isolating Russia and China and ultimately encircling and containing both of those nations. As I have repeatedly said until I'm blue in the face.
Right there.
Division of labor and strategic sequencing. They know the U.S. cannot fight all of these nations at one time. So their goal is to get them all tied up in different conflicts and eliminate them in detail. Take one off the board after the other, so they're not able to assist one another. And eventually, and the problem that Iran, Russia, China, the rest of the multipolar world have is that they're trying to build something, and the U.S. is just simply trying to destroy something. They're not building an alternative world order. They simply want primacy over the planet, and they're willing to divide and destroy every nation in order to achieve that. And as a matter of fact, that is how empire rules over the majority of a region or the planet, is by dividing and destroying everything. So it's quite a predicament.
That is the theory of the case that I can accept. The other one is information that is coming out that Iran actually wanted negotiations. Like that various elements of the Iranian government, Pezeshkian, for example, actually did want to negotiate with the United States, believing that they were going to get something out of the negotiations. And you got situations where there were strikes between Israel and Iran continuously backed away from continuing with the strikes. Meaning, if they would have followed through with True Promise 2 winning, when True Promise 2 happened where Israel attacked, and Iran would have just kept going, this wouldn't have happened. That's what I'm trying to get at. And even this notion of allowing Hezbollah to be picked off, allowing your other resistance fighters to be picked off, with Yemen being the only party that's there helping, and they just stand there and watch. That is weird.
I'm not entirely sure that if they continued with missile exchanges back and forth with Israel, that would have played out in their favor either. We have to remember that we're talking about one nuclear-armed nation that is the proxy of an even larger nuclear-armed power, and they are waging war on Iran. What they dream of is Iran handing them a pretext to wage wider, more direct war, taking off more restrictions. And we have to remember, the U.S. created Israel to be their junkyard dog in the region. And they have nuclear weapons. And if you're worried about one nation on Earth using nuclear weapons, other than the United States, which has already used them on another country, it would be Israel. And
Brian, one catch. Just to interrupt real quick, one catch. But it always was coming. That's what I'm getting at. Meaning, it's not like, hey, if we just wait, this blows over. This was never going to blow over. This was always the objective. This was always the goal. And whereas waiting for it, where you're getting hit first, as opposed to, okay, they hit us first, and now we have a justification to continue to exchange. Meaning, this seems to be a worst case scenario. Iran is going to respond, but Iran is responding in a weaker position than it would have been if it had air defense, if it actually had this notion of being able to strike, as opposed to this theater that they were putting up before. And I want to hit you with one more thing. Alexander Dugin, I don't know if this is true. Maybe you can tell me. I am blown away by this if this is indeed true. He is coming out saying this, and I don't know if you've heard this. It says, Alexander Dugin put this on Telegram. He said, Iran is very far behind the new geopolitical reality. We basically offer them a close military alliance, but certain forces in Tehran hope for an agreement with the West. There was also the idea of creating a Russia-Iranian union state. No one in Tehran took it seriously. The Russian philosopher wrote on Telegram channel. So whereas Russia and North Korea ended up with a military partnership, Iran turned it down, basically saying, we don't want that. That is mind-blowing to me. Had you heard that, for one? And give me your take on this, for two.
No, I have not heard that. I would say this is not a very reliable source. Alexander Dugin has been talking about, President Trump, fighting the deep state, which we know is absolute farcical.
He's been annoying me. He has been annoying me.
So
I attacked him brutally on Twitter. so fair enough.
If you are Russia, you don't want to appear to be weaker. You don't want anyone to know how weak maybe you actually are. The fact that Russia wasn't able to defend the government in Syria, you see a lot of people making excuses for that and trying to blame everyone else, except the reality that Iran also, but Russia is overextended. They are fighting the summation of NATO's power in Ukraine right now. So it's not as if you don't have a good excuse for being overextended. You are overextended, but they're not going to ever admit that. So it's easier to make excuses and claim it was somebody else's fault, especially if it's someone who's being dismantled or dismembered, like blaming the government in Damascus, for example. It's easy to do because they're gone now, but in actuality, the Russians and the Iranians were supposed to prevent that from happening, and they failed, and they failed because they were overextended. And people will say, what is Iran doing? Iran is helping Ansar Allah. Iran is helping Hezbollah. They have been doing that for decades. Right. And they have been maintaining this network across the region, fighting back against U.S. hegemony over the region. And they've had a lot of successes. They've had failures. And there's limits to what they can do versus the United States, its network of proxies in the region. And again, it's easier to slash and burn than it is to build and fortify.
I agree with that. I do agree with that. It's like you're trying to take stuff down. You're not necessarily trying to, divide and conquer, right? It's the typical thing. I am deeply annoyed by this. I just am. The negotiations were always fake. Israel used those negotiations to set up Mossad agents inside Iran itself. At least that's what's being reported. That they set up electronic jamming equipment. They set up drones to attack internally in Tehran as this was taking place. They apparently had agents to have to attack air defense. So effectively to incapacitate Iran before they can even do anything to defend themselves from attacks that were taking place externally from the country itself. The monster was always at the gate. Because that's my point that I'm trying to make. I understand your point. Maybe they're weaker than what they say they are. Because you're right, they were taking their shirt off. They were, flexing. Look at our missile systems. Look at this. Look at that. Look at this. And it's like, okay, but True Promise 3 never came. And because it never came, you've somewhat lost credibility in that. And if you're dealing with a country that has killed 200,000 people and has done it with impunity, like meaning, I've been deeply annoyed today. I'm just saying that way. I've watched analysts say they were shocked. Like people who have done this for years, who would be like, I can't believe Israel did this. And I'm like, I can't believe that you can't believe that Israel did this.
I can't believe that they didn't see
Yeah.
So I yeah.
No, please.
No, I was gonna say I've been warning about this literally since Brookings Institution published that paper in 2009. I have been shouting from the mountaintop, warning everybody that is the playbook. And you can see every single administration, Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter what nonsense they're saying on the campaign trail. Once they get into office, they're going down the list and they are implementing every single one of the measures described inside this policy paper. It is a blueprint. Everything else is a distraction. It is rhetoric. It is propaganda. It is meant to distract, divide, confuse people. The plan was sitting there. It's not leaked. It's on it's on their website. You can download it for free from their website and read it. And I've implored people to read it, and they don't read it. And instead, what they do is they tune in to whatever schizophrenic statement President Trump is saying this hour. And he says one thing 1 hour, another thing another hour, and they actually think that this is the inner thinkings of the U.S. when they have a blueprint sitting right there telling you exactly what they were going to do. It's not a coincidence that I guessed this right. I didn't guess it right. I just read their plan. They wrote it down on a piece of paper, and you just read it. And that is what they're doing. And they're doing the exact same thing to Russia, and they're doing the exact same thing to China. People have to go back because I see so many people saying President Trump was genuinely trying to negotiate with Iran. There's people on the other side thinking that as well. He had no right to talk to Iran about their nuclear program. It has nothing to do with the United States. The United Nations did not designate the U.S. to do this. So the U.S. had no authority to do this in the first place. So why did they do it? If President Trump really wanted peace, he wouldn't have brought it up. He wouldn't have made Iran an issue in the first place. He did it deliberately to create a pretext to set the stage for this, just like his attacking Ansar Allah earlier this year was part of setting the stage precisely for this. And these munitions Israel is using are all from the United States, and they are huge quantities of these types of specialized munitions that you wouldn't just keep on hand for no reason, just to have on hand. They built this stockpile up over months, if not years, specifically for this operation. The U.S. made these and sent them to Israel to do this. This is a U.S. attack laundered through their Israeli proxies. And I'm going to have to argue with people, again, until I'm blue in the face, that Trump is not fighting the deep state. He is a servant of the deep state. He always was. He is right now. And then despite trying to create this false plausible deniability, he's sitting there saying, Iran, you better fully capitulate now, or more of these strikes are coming that Israel's carrying out with the best weapons in the world that we made and gave to them. Billions of dollars worth of weapons and ammunition.
He's saying it openly. Yeah, he's saying it openly. And you still people be like, yeah, but he's fighting the deep state. It's like, dude, what are you looking at?
He has to say that, Jamal.
It is bizarre to me. Like, look, I've sat here for months. And I said, these negotiations are fake. And I said, I don't know what is in Trump's mind, but all things being equal, he is coming up with a lie as a pretext. We've done the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq thing. Now he's doing the same thing for Iran. 2, he's putting something out that Iran is never going to accept. He knows Iran is never going to accept it, and he's using it as a pretext to justify attacks. 3, Israel has everything that they do. The notion that they're going to function without the U.S. permission is nonsense. A, they need to refuel their planes. B, they need to get their weapons. 80% of the money that they use for those weapons and everything else come from the United States. The political support that they get is going to come from the United States. So the notion that Israel just goes rogue and just attacks Iran, and Trump knew nothing about it, something that the Western media kept churning out over and over. And every time they would churn it out, it was like, this is nonsense. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. And Israel even pointed it out themselves. That says it was fake, like the feud, quote unquote, between Netanyahu and Trump was all political for political consumption.
Which we warned people that was all theater, and people didn't believe it. And again, I mean, I could read the one paragraph from the policy paper that lays this all out explicitly. It's irrefutable. You cannot deny it. I could read that to you. I could also go back to the Trump administration first coming into office, and President Trump himself handpicking the absolute worst neocon warmongers.
Yes.
In the U.S. government, in Washington, and filling his administration up with them. Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, Pete Hegseth, Elbridge Colby. He had Michael Anton, who was one of those complicit with the WMD lies. The war, the invasion of Iraq was predicated on in 2003, and even Tulsi Gabbard, who was
she's an embarrassment. She's an embarrassment.
She came in as anti-war, but when the bombs were dropping on Yemen, she couldn't be more enthusiastic about it. So that was from the very beginning. President Trump built a neocon war hawk administration to pick up right where the Biden administration left off. So this is a different part. The part I was going to read, it's under the part where they're talking about. This is the part where they're talking about Israel carrying out the strikes. Mm-hmm. The other part is where they're talking about making a deal with Iran, and they're admitting that the whole reason they're proposing a deal with Iran is so they can say that they tried diplomacy before regime change in Iran. That's what they said. So it says, for those who favor regime change or a military attack on Iran, either by the United States or Israel, this is always the plan. There is a strong argument made for trying this option first. They're talking about diplomacy. Mm-hmm. Inciting regime change in Iran would be greatly assisted by convincing the Iranian people that their government is so ideologically blinkered that it refuses to do what is best for the people and instead clings to a policy that could only bring ruin on the country. So we could see that playing out right now in real time. The ideal scenario in this case would be that the United States and the international community present a package of positive inducements so enticing that the Iranian citizenry would support the deal only to have the regime reject it, which is what you're saying. They pretend to give them options that are actually, we all know, are unacceptable. In a similar vein, any military operation against Iran will likely be very unpopular around the world and require the proper international context, both to ensure the logistical support the operation would require and to minimize the blowback from it. So they're admitting, even the US, if they carried this out, they would need logistical support. So there's no way Israel did it on their own. The best way to minimize international opprobrium and maximize support, however grudging or covert, is to strike only when there is a widespread conviction that the Iranians were given but then rejected a superb offer, one so good that only a regime determined to acquire nuclear weapons and acquire them for the wrong reasons would turn it down. Under those circumstances, the United States or Israel could portray its operations as taken in sorrow, not anger, and at least some in the international community would conclude that the Iranians brought it upon themselves by refusing a very good deal. So it's not about convincing the entire world. Most of the world will see through this, but you will still have enough people, especially enough Americans, especially enough Trump supporters, that will conclude that President Trump genuinely tried to negotiate with Iran, and it was Iran delaying and Israel just looking out for their own self-preservation that precipitated this war, when it was always the plan from the very beginning to use negotiations as a smokescreen to launch an unprovoked unilateral strike against Iran. And the whole document is written in this very frank, open, explicit type of language. This is why I tell people to please read it. You cannot do commentary on U.S.-Iranian relations and not read the literal blueprint they made available publicly as early as 2009.
What do you think happens next? I mean, Iran is obviously going to respond. Now what?
I think their options to respond are very limited. So they shoot missiles and drones at Israel. Then what? There's only so much damage you can do. Israel's going to continue bombing Iran and the United States. I guarantee you the United States is going to find one way or another to make some excuse to get involved as well, especially if these current strikes deliver enough of a blow where the U.S. senses weakness and the possibility of effecting regime change. And they'll activate all the terrorists that they arm and back all across the country, all the opposition groups they've been building up. I always warn people, no matter what it looks like in terms of the military balance of power worldwide, the U.S. is still unparalleled in terms of political interference and information warfare. Nobody takes this seriously. Nobody, not Russia, not China, not Iran, none of them fight this sufficiently.
Yeah.
And they do this to their own detriment, and they give the United States this strength and this advantage over them by doing so.
Brian, yeah, everything you said is right. Everything you said is right. You have my deepest appreciation for coming on at short notice like this. It's just...
Sure, no problem.
Oh, wait. Oh, he's in that now. Okay, that's great. They have to... No. Wait a minute. Okay, Brian, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, my man. Brian Berletic, he is from the new Atlas. He is fantastic. He's nailed it the entire way through. And we are effectively living through what you've been predicting for over a year, if not longer.
What I would prefer is people just listen. I don't want to say that I told you so. I just want people to just listen and go read the policy papers and get ahead of this instead of rushing to catch up after there's piles of bodies and burning cities. That's what I would really like. But anyway, thank you for having me on and helping me get this information out to people.
You be safe, man. Thank you for this.